our speaker today, who will be visiting us through Zoom. His name is Taylor, and Taylor began his spiritual journey about 20 years ago when he surrendered to God with two simple words, a two-word prayer, "Help me." And after saying that prayer, decades of addictions and compulsions were lifted from him, and he began to live life in a new way, dependent on his Creator and at peace with himself and his fellows. He began to live each day under the guidance of Spirit. His faith grew, new opportunities presented themselves in his business life and his personal life, and he felt a strong call to lead others and to serve others, and he became a leader in the 12-step community. He teaches that we are individual expressions of divinity rather than following a doctrine of rules created by other men, and that there is one hub with many spokes. Taylor completed a 3-year course of ministry at the Fellowship of Today at the School of Ministry in Lansing in 2017. The messages he shares come from the quiet time he spent with his Creator, and from lessons he learned from life. Please welcome.
I'd like to do a breathing exercise. Then I'll do the meditation to relax and center us so that we may better receive today's message. So this breathing exercise is very simple. It's done to the count of 3, and there are 3 cycles to the exercise. And when we count 1, 2, 3, we actually uniformly space each count by saying 1 elephant, 2 elephant, 3 elephant to ourselves. Okay? So it's in 1, 2, 3, and then it's hold 1, 2, 3, and then it's exhale 1, 2, 3. Is everybody ready to try this? Okay. The worst that'll happen is you'll be relaxed. Okay, let's begin. Let's inhale. Okay, how did that go for everybody? All right. I'm ready to do the meditation. You should be relaxed. Let's move into this time of meditation and get comfortable. Bring your attention back to your breath. There's nothing you need to do except to make it expansive and experience it. Just notice the rhythm of it. With our breath, spirit is moving in, through, and out of each of us. Know that we're created in the likeness of our Creator. We are extensions of that energy. Allow our bodies to relax, starting with their feet. Wiggle your toes. Flex your ankles. Allow any stress to flow up your ankles, through your calves, into your thighs, and through your buttocks. Relaxation comes if we let go of anything that is not like love in our bodies. Stress is not like love. So we let it go. Up through the abdomen, through our backs. Feel the energy that is here today, supporting us in this space, here to gently remind us of who we really are. We have begun to notice that there's not much to really let go of. Only error. This relaxation wave moves up into the chest, into the back of the neck, into our jowls, and through the top of our heads. A beam of light moving out into this world to open our hearts and minds. And now we're going to begin our visualization. Let's imagine our hearts and minds filled with warm light, illuminating every dark cranny until we see them fully open and taking in this wonderful warmth and light. Let us remind ourselves that our thoughts are what creates our reality, and that we are the creators of our experience on this plane. And so we make a commitment to ourselves to only visualize the best possible outcomes in all of our affairs. Let's imagine that we are fully open to grace and to feel the love of our Creator flowing through us. And through all of these, and through all of those that we love and call family as well, warming us and comforting us as we sit in this space, relaxed and safe. And now, let's visualize us slowly coming back into our bodies. Let's wiggle our toes and bend our ankles and gently move our fingers and take a few deep breaths until we are present in our bodies. Fully relaxed and receptive. Ready to live in the flow of rhythm and life. And so it is. So my lesson today is on grace. Few words in Christian theology are used more or understood less than the word grace. I've often heard phrases such as God's grace. What does the word mean? How does grace work in our lives? Let's have a little mini lesson right now. We'll just stop for a few minutes. We'll hold it to 5 minutes because there's a limit to our time this morning. But let's engage all of you that are our audience and ask you what the word grace means in your life. Don't overwhelm me with responses now.
Zoomers, feel free to jump in, and I have a mic here for the in-persons. That just the recognizing each other, to be really seen and to be valued and loved, is God coming between us, God being invited between us. Thanks.
It's loving awareness.
Very good. All right, well, let's move on then. I must have just put you into such a relaxed state in the meditation that, well, we'll see if we can stir up your thinking a little bit as we go forward. In theology, the word grace is surrounded by an air of mystery. I believe it is a very simple explanation of the natural flow of our humanity. The word grace means favor. You are favored simply because you are the activity of God expressing himself as you. I'm going to say that again because I think it's impactful. You are favored simply because you are the activity of God expressing himself as you. Why is your hand favored as part of your body? Because it is your body at the point of your hand, designed to enable your body to carry out its objectives. Thus, the hand has not only strength, but also feeling and tenderness. One of the components of grace is God's will, which is another often confused term. So let me talk about the will of God to help explain grace. As long as we're willfully bombarding our lives with impulsive acts of limitation, there's little hope that we can grasp the idea of will. The will of God for you is the ceaseless longing of the Creator to fulfill him or herself in what he has created. If you miss this point, you will think of grace as a kind of favoritism that you solicit through prayer, or luck, or special because you're chosen. God's will holds a creative, loving intention that is so great that despite the power of the spoken words, I wish I were dead and yet go on living. God's will for you is so intense, so continuous, that it even filters through your willfully closed mind. Now, let's talk about grace. Grace is not a special movement in mind or a special activity or gift of God. It is simply an explanation of the way the mind works. I'm going to touch on karma. Grace explains the inadequacy of karma, which is the endless cycle of cause and effect. It is true that as you sow, so shall you reap. Yet God's desire to express through you and as you is so great that you never completely reap the harvest of error, and you reap more good than you sow. A medical researcher says that the body is biased on the side of health. This is the grace factor that is absent in the classic concept of karma. The missing link in the teachings of the East is that we're not lonely pilgrims on the path trying to reach something in God. We are dynamic expressions of God on the quest to know and release something in ourselves. We may limit the flow of good, but we can always know the truth and be free to embrace the Christ energy flowing through us. Could that be grace? And maybe this truth is right here and is unconditional love. You're not a helpless creature bobbing about like a cork on the seas of life at the mercy of the storms of fate and circumstance. You are the very self-livingness of God. I'm going to repeat that because I think it's significant. You are not a helpless creature bobbing about like a cork on the seas of life at the mercy of the storms of fate and circumstance. You are the very self-livingness of God. When you desire spiritual growth, you also desire to know love. When you desire to know about love, you desire to know about spiritual growth. When you have the earnest will to learn this, grace will find you. It is God who has first desired love in you. When you're passionate and inspired, it is divine urge working through you. You're not simply a subject of God, but with God, one with God. You are the activity of God in expression, beloved with an everlasting love. You are the movement of love. Living in a state of grace is an expression often used to imply that the person has earned God's favor. It may appear that by joining a church or accepting a particular religious cliche, you get something special and will earn God's favor. This concept is like knowing someone at City Hall who arranges to fix parking tickets. There's no good old boy system with God. Living in a state of grace can mean nothing more nor less than living in a disciplined awareness of the divine flow through me. God's flow is constant. Our experience of it changes with our consciousness. This does not minimize the universal law of sequence and consequence. In the horizontal experience of life, we're bound to reap as we have sowed, but we have a choice to introduce into consciousness the vertical flow. It's like turning on a light. Darkness is no longer a factor. Grace is the recognition of love, and that we are part of that love, like the hand is part of the body. The law of consciousness is unbreakable because the law of God's love is unbreakable. And when we reconcile that, we can reach the vertical levels of consciousness of love always given to us. We open the door to grace. Is this true for you? Absolutely. The high consciousness heals because God is the higher consciousness and love heals. We weaken because we lose sight of love. Jesus loved. Let's think about this. Jesus had no home, didn't know where his next meal was coming from, had no money, and yet the teachings, the strength of his teachings is present 2,000 years later. And something of the infinite is always filtering through and becoming part of your consciousness. When we limit God's love, we limit the spark of life, our life. When we experience God's love and embrace our hand in the body of love, we're touched by grace. Is this true in your life? Certainly is in mine. When we glimpse unconditional love, we open a door in our hearts and our life becomes changed. You're modified by God's love in you. Sometimes life may be like living in a house with every door and window tightly closed. Invariably, there's enough air leaking in and around the doors and windows so that your oxygen needs are met. Grace, as the divine activity of God's love, is working for you constantly to open the windows and the doors and feel the fresh air. It's not dependent upon any special faith or prayer on your part, like the buoyancy of water that will keep you afloat even when you try to force yourself under. Grace fulfills divine law by sustaining you in spite of yourself. You don't have to earn grace. It's not something that comes only to the good. It comes to all alike because we are all expressions of God. By the grace of God, a criminal is still loved by God and can still find forgiveness and ultimate rehabilitation through a love that transcends man's laws. Grace is simply a wonderful facet of the activity of God in you, of allowing God as love. Is this true? I think so. It is not something that you must work for or develop or earn. It simply is. Love simply is. Love is always knocking. God's grace is an assurance, an explanation of why things are never hopeless and why we never receive the full harvest of the error that we create. It's why we always receive a little more good than we earn. Certainly, we must be willing to accept responsibility for all that is manifest in our lives. But don't get bogged down in the grim and fatalistic acceptance of working out your karma, or that the universe is not friendly, or that bad things happen to you. And when you hear he was healed by God's great grace, remember, this is not some special act of God for one person, but a specialization of the divine available for every person. There's a pull in the universe. We feel it, ever seeking to lift us to the heights of our divine nature. It is as real and as inevitable as the force of gravity. When I let go and open the windows to let love in, these are the moments that I experience grace in my life. See if you have some of these moments too. When I experience a child's smile, or stand before a glorious sunset with tears in my eyes, I have let in love and been touched by God's grace. To be in awe of a sky full of stars, or to feel a friend's touch when I needed kindness, or a beautiful artwork that inspires me, I am recognizing God's presence. And to see the beauty of a tiny flower, I'm seeing with the eyes of God. So allow me to tell you a personal story that is symbolic of grace. As some of you know, I'm a combat veteran who suffers from PTSD. When I lie down to fall asleep for the night, Stella, my guide dog, is right alongside me. I'm gently stroking her fur as I fall off to sleep. She then goes to her pen to sleep. When I awake, Stella awakens too, and she comes to me. Love comes to me, and that's grace. And all I need is to allow myself to be loved. I would like some of you to share moments when you experience God's grace in your lives. And we're going to take 5 minutes to do this. All right, don't overwhelm me. Come on. None of you have experienced God's grace in your lives. Lordy, I need to lift you up in prayer.
I had a thought while you were thinking, Taylor, because I've had some stress lately. But I also am aware, in my awareness is not all of a sudden I have this wonderful feeling of grace. It's like little things. It's appreciating. It's like Dan was saying, the awareness of grace or the love of God. And it's always there, I know, because it comes at weird times when I may have been cussing at the lights and I'm hurrying to get somewhere, and the lights all change. And I get there 10 minutes earlier than I thought. But it's not all of a sudden with me. With me, it's little things. It's kind of learning to appreciate the sunset or the flower or even the problem that comes up that helps you understand something in another way. But so that's I just think it's in layers, not always mind-blowing experience.
Last night during the night, you know, those times you wake up, I had a memory, like why this memory came to mind of when I was a real little girl, like really tiny, and Christmas morning of going out into the living room and just seeing the lights on the tree. It was like beautiful. I think that's grace. It just felt really, I don't know, I can't describe it, but I think it's just the feeling of magic, or kind of like all is right with the world.
Thank you, Taylor. And you know, when you were talking about that, I was having this, I get little video tapes that come through my head. And like, I saw that we're all born with grace, like you say, but we don't always open that porthole, you know, that connects us. And I was thinking, whenever we see a holy person, you see them surrounded by this light, this aura of light, or a halo, you know? But I'm thinking, well, that's grace. They're in the space. They're allowing themselves to be in that space of unconditional love, holy space. Different people will name it different things, but the point is you're in that holy spiritual space. You're not in the 3D matter type of element space. And like you said, when you open the window, let the sun in. When we open the porthole and allow, and that's all we have to do is allow. Like you say, there's nothing special that we have to do, but we get in a state of grace. And it makes more sense now, because I always had what is grace? It's something like air. You can't put your hands on it or paint it, but I think that's the closest thing I will see is when they show an aura around someone. I now will say, they're in the state of grace. And when you are in the state of grace, you speak differently, you think differently, you act differently, you love differently, because it's an unconditional. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
I get into a state of gratitude, especially when blessing food before a meal. It dawned on me that people call that saying grace. So I realized that when I'm giving thanks and gratitude, I am in that, for a few seconds, a state of grace.
Hi, this is Leslie. I have a memory from a few years back where I was at a library sale in East Lansing, and I came across a collection of books that had belonged to a Unity minister. They had his nameplate inside, and I bought all of those books. And I kept some for my personal collection, and I donated some back to the church where they originated from. And I kind of have a knack for finding things like that. And when it happened, it feels like God just smiled at me, that those books came through my hands and got recirculated back.
Mm-hmm. These are wonderful examples of grace.
I think grace comes when we absolutely surrender. Often I find that grace happens when I'm really been in a jam And I've been using my willful way to try and fix something that seems beyond fixing. And then when it gets so challenging, so completely difficult that I can't hold the energy of trying anymore and just let go, to me, that's when I've found grace over and over again.
I'd like to share something. For me, grace is what loosens the fist of fear. And for me, being able to be here on this call and hear your talk, Taylor, and hear community members share, just to be in that awareness of grace. I thank you very much. And it's a very gracious experience for me.
Thank you for sharing that.
Luann touched on that grace is God doing for you what you're not able to do for yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And yesterday, before my walk, I had a bottle of water, and I filled it up, and then I could not find the cap of my bottle. And I looked for about 5 minutes and couldn't find my cap for the bottle. And I said, please don't let this happen to me. And so I'm looking everywhere, and I looked into a bowl on top of the fridge. And in that bowl was a plum that I had forgotten from 3 weeks ago. And that plum was perfectly ripe. It was, and I ate it, it was the sweetest, juiciest plum I've ever had. And had I not lost that cap, I would not have found that plum, not have had that delicious moment. In fact, that plum would have been smelling probably in a couple of weeks. And then after I ate that plum, guess what? Suddenly the cap was directly in front of me all the time. I didn't even see it. So to me, that is grace. That is God working in my life. And the grace is that I can recognize that and say thank you to it.
Just kind of on the heels of what Pat was saying and getting kind of choked up about is it's those times where I'm swept off my feet with how much love, the turnaround, the 180 that happens from wherever I'm at to then what God's giving me kind of takes my breath away, I guess.
Thank you, everyone. In closing, I want to thank you, Taylor, and the meditation. Thank you, Dave, for that wonderful music. Thank you for our camera person and our Zoom technician. Thank you for Pat for the 12 powers. Thank you for me. For being me as the podium assistant. And that's the truth.